Hello, everyone, and welcome to Fridays at 4 on twitch.tv/DDO stream. I'm DDO's community manager, Cordovan, and I'll be with you for the next hour with a guest here to talk a little bit about Lamania, because we've had a very busy Lamania week this week, and we're going to get into it with senior systems designer Steelstar. How you doing, Steelstar?
I'm doing great.
Excellent, excellent. So, really, the reason we have you on is to talk a little bit about Macrotechnic and Rune Arms. We're going to go through some of the
Yeah.
other bits of Lamania later on after we have you on the show, and that should pretty well wrap up the whole hour. But I do have something very special to show off towards the end of the show that I'm going to leave people kind of hanging on that one. So, we have long had players ask us for additional epic destinies, and one of them has been something that is particularly flavorful for our artificers who have tried to figure out which epic destiny prior to use. And this is not just an artificer epic destiny. As a matter of fact, we're going to talk about ways in which non-artificers can get rune arm use in this tree, for example. But is that kind of one of the impetuses of choosing Macrotechnic here, is to offer that flavor to people, playing that
Yeah.
role?
It's something in the old system we never really got to. The old system really had a lot more direct connection between individual destinies and heroic player classes. They weren't quite 100% connected at any given point, but they were pretty similar. With the newer system, we moved quite a few of those specific connections out. So a lot of the destinies have much more broad scope than they did before, but there still hasn't been up until now a destiny that contained a lot of artificers kind of core identity points. The tough thing being, artificer has a lot of core identity points. So when it came to it, we designed a couple versions of the tree early on that tried to do way too much, and we're trying to do several things that other existing destinies did, or maybe other future destinies can pick up. But yes, ultimately, this epic destiny has themes similar to the artificer class. It has good things for a lot of artificer characters, as well as a lot of things for characters who are not artificers who may want to take a little splash into artificer territory.
All right, so we have a thread up on the forums. Let me drop that into chat here while we talk. But if you want to follow along, play the home game, as it were, you can. But let's just really kind of go through some of the tree here and see what we're talking about. So with the first, let's focus on the cores to start with. You get magical training, not surprising. A lot of the epic destinies that might be applicable to spellcasters get that. You get hit points, electric, but the focus is on electric, sonic, rust, repair. Is that correct?
Yeah, let's kind of just outline the kind of core focuses of the tree, or of the destiny itself, which is electric, sonic, and repair, rust spellcasting, rune arms, and defense, but not necessarily tank.
And so you'll see on these
yes.
scores, that you get additional fortification, healing amplification, spell points, and you can read it here. But it's probably worth mentioning. Go ahead.
Oh, it's a big pile of stats in Core 1, but if you look at it pretty closely, it is both the general pile of stats we put into spellcasting destinies, and a lot of the general stats we put into martial destinies as well, because we recognize that some artificers will be coming in here from hybrid backgrounds, or even melee or ranged generalist backgrounds.
When we start heading into Core 2, we really get into the start of what'll be some additional things with rune arms that we'll be getting into here in a few minutes. The first one being that you can benefit from a bunch of metamagic feats in your Core 2 for your rune arm. And that's somewhat new as well, certainly new for the Epic Destiny system. So, at least I think so, right? Is there an exception?
Yeah, so no, there's not an exception. This is new. I'm going to be honest. The implementation on this was me when I was thinking about this tree, going, why don't metamagics work on rune arms? And the answer kind of is that when you fire a rune arm, while you're doing the action, you're not really the one casting the spell. The rune arm's casting the spell. And so I kind of set the rune arm up to think it has meta magic feats if you have meta magic feats, and it has them on if you have it on when you have this ability, and meta magic's worked. So it's kind of a fun coincidence that seems to work really well, and I'm kind of excited that players that use rune arms are going to be able to apply their meta magics.
In Core 3, one of the interesting changes is the ablative armor spell will now block additional points of damage per caster level with no cap. And then later on, we have an actual 15% exceptional bonus to armor class, perhaps not entirely dissimilar to Sacred Defender or something like that. So it's a way to get a pretty significant percentage boost to your overall
Yeah.
IC. All right, so as we start heading into the tiers, as is generally the case, the first tiers offer benefits to a fairly wide variety of play styles. Things like
Right.
armor, general amplification, PRR, spellcraft, things like that. Your rune arms
Yeah.
will
So
charge faster, though. That's one that we could mention.
that
So,
is a nice one.
yeah.
So yeah, thinking about the first tier of any given destiny, um, if you are taking this as your second or third tree, but aren't necessarily investing in the theme of that tree, we want you to have stuff to be able to take that's just generally useful. You know, repair amp is useful no matter what kind of construct or artificer you are. AC and PRR is really solid if you play anything that cares about those defenses. Spellcraft and Use Magic Device applies to a wide variety of magical characters, and reflex saves, which are phenomenal.
When we look at the multi-selector discharge, that's the epic strike for the Macrotechnic here. And it offers you a series of different choices that are area of effect damage
Mm-hmm.
dealers, essentially.
Yep, these are there's three of them. There are electric and sonic point blank AOE spells, SLAs. In this tree, you're gaining a lot of defenses, and one of the things we wanted to do that is have you be able to fire off AOE at point blank because you are generally speaking going to be a little more defensive if you're investing heavily in this tree. Doesn't mean it's the right fit for everybody in this tree. Uh, but that is kind of some of the logic behind it. And then the third one is an AoE repair. It is, I believe, similar to one of the other healing ones, but I'd have to go back and double check.
Perhaps the positive energy blast, a little bit. I don't know.
Possibly, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. All right, and then to round out tier 1 here, we have blast shields, which particularly at rank 3 no longer fails reflex saves on a roll of 1. So kind of dipping into the trapping side of Macrotechnic a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
And that is
not just
really
trapping.
strong on a number of builds who care about trying to never fail a reflex save.
Speaking of which, in tier 2 with fluidity, we're just basically making arcane spell failure a non-issue here.
Mm-hmm. Yep, it's easy and simple. Can dive 2 tiers into this tree and pick that up.
Yep. Radiant Prison, target non-boss foe is sealed away for 8 seconds in an unbreakable force field with no saving throw, non-bosses. In this force field they can't act, but they take 95% less damage and healing from all sources except for untyped. So this is basically I'll deal with you later.
Yes. So it's the kind of CC. It's not for everybody necessarily, but if you're the kind of player who occasionally runs into, I don't know, like a Reaper or a particularly nasty champion and just wants to set them aside so you can deal with other things in the room, or you just want to start out a fight by just putting something in a bubble for a minute, it's a really useful tool. I think it might have a lot more utility as a solo player than in large groups. But it definitely has its uses.
All right, so let's get to one of the potentially more exciting additions to this tree, which is rune arm use. Previously, that has been an artificer only thing, and that's no longer the case. Anyone who dips into this tree will get the rune arm use feat. Your caster level with rune arms will be the higher of half your character level versus your artificer level. And if you already have rune arm use, it gets you an additional stable charge tier.
Yeah.
So first off, what does that do for those who don't know, what does an additional stable charge tier actually get you?
When you are charging your rune arm, if you are moving, your charge tier goes down to your stable charge tier and stays there until you stop moving, at which point it starts charging up again.
Yeah.
This starts pretty low, but if you gain start stable charge tiers, that can get higher, meaning when you stop moving, it takes less time to get back up to a full charge.
How does
Um,
the rune arm use itself play versus other offhand weapons here? Because traditionally the rune arm has been separate from that. Is that still the case in terms of things you wield in your offhand, for example?
Behind the scenes, a little bit more than other things. The rune arms, generally speaking, aren't going to get you the blocking benefits of a shield, but they are functionally kind of similar to orbs. Orbs you can still shield bash with, but I'm not sure anybody does that terribly often. Rune arms you can't, but you innately gain the ability to fire that thing. Which, if you're built as a spellcaster, even with the caster levels, you're still going to be doing some damage for essentially free. Uh, if you are a melee ranged or hybrid, you're getting the imbue damage that all rune arms offer in the element of that rune arm, which applies to all of your melee and ranged hits. So that can be a little bit of extra damage to a lot of extra damage, depending on the kind of character you're playing.
This means anyone will get the rune arm use feat if you dip into tier 2 and take rune arm use. So
Yeah,
there's no real restrictions on that.
there's no real restrictions on that. It has a caster level listed in the ability, the higher of half your character level versus your artificer level. So if you're an odd artificer split, that may actually, and already have the rune arm charge feat, that may increase your caster level with it. But yes, there's no general restrictions. There are still equipping restrictions. You can generally only use rune arms with one-handed weapons and crossbows, and that hasn't changed. So it's obviously not going to be a good fit for someone who's primarily a two-handed weapon or a longbow user or a quarterstaff user. But it does open up quite a few interesting builds you can make.
At the next benefit here is a multi-selector of hammer. You're missing an opportunity to call it hammer time, by the way. I'm just saying. It's lightning or thunder.
We might have to consider that.
Stop. Hammer time. Because we already got stop, and now you got hammer time. I'm just saying. So Chaos Hammer, but electric, or Chaos Hammer, but sonic, largely based on what for your build you're specking into for spell
Right.
power and such. And it's an area of effect. Yeah.
It is. It's almost exactly what the Chaos Hammer spell does, but with electric damage or sonic damage, without the alignment restrictions. It does a big hammer that does that kind of damage to things in the AoE.
Okay. So let's talk a little bit about the Destiny Mantle animated Aegis.
Right.
Yep.
Okay. So this, you create a small animated object that floats with you. While it's active, you get 15 repair amplification. You absorb 10% of all force, piercing, bludgeoning, slashing, electric, sonic, and rust damage you take. This is increased to 15% if you're wearing a.
Okay.
So if you play any tanky or defense-oriented characters, you might notice that this is a similar base mantle to what is in Unyielding Sentinel, but it covers a different set of damage types. And the numbers are a little bit lower. Some of these damage types are more powerful or more common or harder to resist, like force. Absorption is not terribly common. So it's a little bit lower, but it covers the other end of damage types relative to Unyielding Sentinel.
All right. As we move into tier 3, we get to things like additional multi-selectors, actually quite a few multi-selectors in this core, and that's based really on the branches that you might be using for your build. So, like the kind of spells you're casting, whether it be evocation, transmutation, conjuration, abjuration. There's
we have a
yeah, go for it.
we have a number of DCs that show up in tier 3 of any tree that does casting. This is a set that's found in a lot of Artificer, Bard, and Alchemist spells. And so this covers that. It covers it's another tree that covers those, and we have an overall plan of which trees long term are going to be covering which DCs, and a plan to keep that pretty even overall as time goes on.
Sure. When we get into the multi-selector for Technique Drive, one of which is just a straight-up double shot, obviously most
Yeah,
applicable
that
to
that
ranged
also does
characters.
double strike.
Oh, does
It's
it?
missing from those notes,
Okay.
but it does both double shot and double strike.
Okay. Efficiency Drive is one where you get 3/6 up to 10% spell cost reduction. That is something that's not dissimilar to things that might be found in other casting trees. And then threat generation as well for your more tanky types.
Yes, for the more takey types, this is where you get that. I saw people in the chat were asking a little bit about, why not necessarily tankiness? Is this a good time to kind of hop off and talk about that a
Yeah,
little?
let's do it. I was actually
Okay.
not ready to ask
So
that, so.
we have one fairly defensive Epic Destiny already in Unyielding Set, but some of what's there is inherently has you take on threat generation. But we don't have as much in the Destinies of I would like to gain additional defenses, but not incur additional threat. And so one of the things we want to position in this tree is that you can take that. You have the option by default to get more defenses without taking on more threat. But you still have the option, for instance, here in Tier 3 to take Flash Drive, gain threat generation that stacks, as far as I know, with other sources, as well as being able to go into Sentinel, get your threat there, and then come back here and take this as a secondary tree, get more of the defenses, get that extra threat generation if you wanted to. So it's about opening up different build options that we didn't necessarily have available in the system for this.
The next benefit really applies to Root Arm DCs and gives you a pretty significant up to +3 boost to those DCs, in addition to some spell power of various types as well.
Yeah, that'll be very handy. Rune Arm DCs as a school stack with evocation bonuses. All Rune Arms use evocation as their school for firing. So anything you get to Rune Arm DCs just stacks on top.
All right, so let's move to a Strike Drive. We have a Ruin Drive, Blast Drive, and Dissonance Drive. And these are, well, the first one is a large amount of rust damage and an AoE effect, disassembling enemy constructs. Using Repair Strike, this also applies a supercharged buff to you that decreases your meta magic cost for a short time.
Yeah.
I assume the
So
numbers will just be visible there?
Yes, they should be. And if they're not there right now, but I'll try to get them in there for next preview.
Yeah.
Excuse me.
Yeah, we should mention this is our
so
first preview of Update 60, so a lot of this is subject to change, and the writing will get adjustments over time here. So,
I'm going to answer a quick question from chat. This is not a range damage tree overall. It is spellcasting, it is rune arms, and it is defense. I think I said at the beginning, but maybe not everyone was in yet. Artificers do a ton of different kinds of things. We could not fit them all into one tree. There is a fair amount of range damage representation throughout other destinies. Future destinies may also have more, but this one is not a range damage tree. All right, so the drives. We've got Ruin Drive there, which, rust damage, it's a pretty narrow kind of thing, but if you were going into some content where you knew it was going to be heavily construct focused, you might respec and take this. It also has a nice bonus if you took the repair-based strike, which could be very useful for you.
the Blast Drive stuns, assuming they fail a save. And again, similar to this, if you're using then the relevant strike associated with it, you get an additional benefit as well. In this case, an increased movement speed for a little while. Does that stack over cap, as they say?
I think offhand that it's action boost typed, but I need to double check on the implementation.
Okay. And then Dissonance Drive will confuse enemies, the confusion effect, assuming they fail a save. And if you've got the Sonic Strike, it'll apply vulnerability to the enemies as well. So then the last one for Tier 3 is the Destiny Mantle Improvement, which is if you have that Animated Aegis active, you'll get additional physical and magical resistance rating. And if you have a Rune Arm, it's 10.
Yep. So this follows the same thing we were seeing earlier, where you can be in here, you can take this mantle for defense if you really want a defensive mantle. If you are using a rune arm, it's a little bit better. And that's also somewhat offsetting. Like if you're using a rune arm, you're not using a shield, for instance.
Yeah. Moving into Tier 4, you do have to be level 26 to get into Tier 4 here. That's, again, standardized really throughout the Epic Destiny tree. Galvanic Attunement will give you additional spell power of the various types that are supported in this tree, in addition to universal spell power. Arcane Imbuement is where you're getting your additional imbue dice in this tree. Is that correct?
That's correct. I think I recall that we may be moving that down to tier 3 in the next preview, but we'll have more details as we get closer to that. But very useful if you play a character that uses imbue dice to be able to get more out of a destiny.
The Boost Drive multi-selector essentially adds a damage over time effect to your rune arms. Is that correct?
Not damage over time. It is a damage on your rune arm shots that has a cooldown. Okay. And as it goes, what we found in Lamani is this was probably a little too strong and incentivized to play by just firing your rune arm just at the lowest tier the second it's off cooldown. So we're going to adjust this a little bit for preview 2. But essentially it's going to continue to do what it's doing now, which is additional damage when you fire your rune arm.
Okay. And then we get a Metamagic selector in the Epic Destiny tree itself in Tier 4 here of Maximize, Empower, and Intensify. Again, that'll now apply to your rune arms where it perhaps previously did not. And then to round that one out, Destiny Mantle Improvement is Magical Recoil, which again gives you more of various spell type spell powers, and when you have your Destiny Mantle active, firing a rune arm will grant you spell resistance equal to your character level for 10 seconds. Moving up to Tier 5, Enhanced Macrotech spell focus is an additional up to +3 to your spell DCs. Critical Connection is something that I think people have seen flavors of in other trees, but this one applies to a rune arm, where you'll get a +1 crit multiplier on a roll of 19 or 20.
Right, so if you are a weapon using Artificer in here, you aren't losing out by taking Tier 5 in here, because that critical multiplier in a 19 to 20 exists in, I think, every one of the martial destinies. So we did want to include it in here if you were, a melee or ranged artificer, wanted to take this tree as your primary tree and go into Tier 5. We didn't want you to lose out on that damage.
I should correct myself. I think I said for your rune arm, while it in actuality is while wielding a rune arm. If you've got a rune arm, it applies to all of your weapons, not just the rune arm.
So I believe, with the exception of Dreadnought, who may just get it in general, the other martially focused destinies all have some qualifier, while centered, while using certain kinds of weapons. So the qualifier for that +1 on a 19 to 20 is while wearing a rune arm.
Yep. A quick question from chat on the spell resistance that we were talking about. Do you know if that is a stacking effect as well? Do you know what the type of that is?
I believe it is, yes. Okay. So if you've got a lot of other spell resistance, that could get very...
Okay, I'm a cleric. I always have spell resistance. It's too easy to pop that spell. So, all right. So, Armor of Legends has a lot associated with it. Makes me feel like this is probably one of the biggies in Tier 5, huh?
Mm-hmm.
Yep. So it makes your Epic Mage Armor feats bonus now untyped, meaning essentially you will get significantly more armor class than you might have otherwise. And grants you +1 armor class per character level. You also get a bonus based on which of the following drives you end up having. So
right. So this goes down through all the multi-selects you made at lower tiers and gives you action boost based bonuses to a whole list of stats. As I said, those are action boost bonuses, so they won't stack with actual action boosts, but you have these stably as long as Epic Mage Armor is working on.
Okay. The epic moment of maximum overdrive. It says shift into maximum overdrive. That means you get in a truck and tear through a diner or something. Is that what it is? Or maybe
yeah, basically that seems right.
Yeah.
No, we had done a couple of treatments of the epic moment for this tree, and a lot of them just weren't working. Like they didn't feel right, and so we said, let's see what players really want out of an epic moment in this tree. And players have given really good ideas, some of which I'd really love to do, but are technically unfeasible or practically unfeasible. but also some solid ones that are within the realm of possibilities. So we're taking those ideas, putting something together, and giving it a try next preview.
Do you know the question on the current version of Lamania, the Armor of Legends was a 10-second active effect? Do you know if that's
That I
accurate?
believe was a bug.
Okay.
So
The Destiny Mantle improvement, then, to round out Tier 5, is a force field generator. So, with your animated Aegis Epic Destiny active, you'll get a 10% insight bonus to your maximum hit points. And while you have a rune arm equipped, it's 20%. So,
yeah,
I'm guessing
there
you're
you
going to have
go.
a rune arm equipped if you're taking it all the way up top
Yes,
here.
we
So,
kind of, if you reach tier 5, we assume you're fairly invested in this tree to the point where you really should be wearing them.
yeah. So, then the Epic Past Life to round out this particular part of the preview is a trap damage absorption of a Martial Past
Yes,
Life stance. So that's
and that's
3%.
and,
Yeah?
and
Okay,
that's an
go for it.
interesting point in its own. This is an arcane destiny, but the past life we're introducing this time around is a martial past life.
Okay. And that's a 3% trap damage absorption per stack of this Past Life feat. And then for each
Hmm.
stack of it you also get 2 armor class and an additional armor class per 10 character levels. So,
Right.
uh, and trap damage, that means if it's a trap in the game, it's just
Mhm.
absorbing? Yeah.
If you have 3 stacks of this and have yeah, if you have 3 stacks of this past life, you're getting 9% less damage from traps, and that also stacks if you have, like, say it's a fire trap and you have the damage absorption, I believe, arcane epic past life running. So you can be taking significantly less damage if you have that and this on at the right times.
Okay. Before we move on to the Runearm changes, other changes that are happening here in Update 60, let's give the viewers a chance to ask some questions about the Macrotechnic
Yeah.
Epic Destiny tree that maybe haven't been covered to date. And I'm actually going through chat as we speak. So. Stormtom is actually saying it is called Hammer Time.
Oh,
Currently on
good.
Lamania.
Okay.
Good. That's how it should be. Or not. I don't know. I'm just saying. Come on, right? Meanwhile, people are like, "Wait a second, what are they talking about? Okay, who? Who is that?" Yeah. Okay. Also, I agree with Druid's Fire here. Flash Drive is a pretty funny name. So, yeah.
Yes, flash drive.
With the addition of this Epic Destiny, this will not impact Epic Completionist because that feat is based on the number of Epic feats you have and not that you have all the Epic past feats. Just want to double check. So I guess it's a question mark, is will it impact Epic Completionist?
I don't believe it does. It's been a little while since I've looked at the rules on Epic Completionist, but that sounds familiar. So I'm going to tentatively say it doesn't impact that.
Okay. Do you think we might see the overdrive, or at least a stab at the overdrive effect during the next Lamania preview?
I think so. Yes.
Yep.
Hmm.
Lots of Sonic mentioned in the tree, but not a lot of Sonic rune arms. Are we going to be doing Sonic rune arms?
Stay tuned.
Okay. It is worth mentioning, like Triax does, that Ablative Armor is currently an Artificer spell. So the benefits to the Ablative Armor spell does basically mean that you are an Artificer in this case.
Yeah, that's a solid point. We try not to do too many things that are specifically linked to one class and only one class in Epic Destinies, and that does break that rule a little bit. So that's something maybe we'll look into between preview 2 and whatever's after.
Any final questions before we move on? Maybe we should just move on to the next bit, which is that we have some general rune arm changes happening in Update 60 here as well. Obviously, complementary with the Macrotechnic, it was a good time to take a look at some overall rune arm adjustments here as well.
Yeah. Okay.
It's a
So
lot.
this is kind of a wall of text. and it's still a work in progress because there's definitely been some feedback about the efficacy of things as people played it on Lamania this week. But the essential thing I was trying to approach is that in the current Runearm meta on live, we have around 20 shot types. It may or may not be actually that number in game. That may be the number behind the scenes. And by shot type, I mean the spell that fires when you fire the Runearm. About 20 different types. And the amount of damage that they can output vastly differs between them. Right now on live, the best Runearm out there does twice as much damage as the next best Runearm there. And it goes way down from there until some that are doing, I want to say around 10% of what the best Runearm in the game does, assuming that they were all, the same minimum level, same amount of item power, which is not great. We have a variety of Runearm shot types, and they should all be some amount of viable. There's also shot spread. Some of them shoot very wide, and that makes them almost useless in a number of dungeons. And some of them are just finicky. Some of them were having troubles where they would just explode the second you fire them. And so we've tried to tackle a lot of those problems. There's still a few lingering things that may or may not get through in this update because there's a lot going on in this update. But overall, we're trying to make the Runearm experience better and make more Runearms viable.
So, what does it mean that all Runearm shots will now have a consistent projectile size? Because like you were saying, some is like maybe a fire attack pretty close to you, whereas some of them shoot a very large distance away.
Right.
How can they be the same size?
So, we have a couple of kinds of Runearms, and I believe right now it's restricted to fire and electric that fire in a cone. That cone's not really changing in terms of its size and detect, but that doesn't fire a projectile at all. It's just a detect in front of you.
Okay.
The rest of our Runearms fire projectiles of some kind. The little force bolts or the trash shots or what have you. And when I kind of pulled all of them in to take a look at their physics, the parts of them that actually matter for collision, some of them were extremely teeny tiny, and some of them were almost the size of the player character.
That's a big shot.
Yeah. That is a big shot. And those ones, I'm thinking of light spirals specifically. In most cases, when you would fire light spirals while standing on the ground, it would disappear immediately because it would impact the ground the second you shot it. Yeah. And so that Runearm sort of didn't really work unless you were angled weirdly or jumping or anything like that. And so I was looking to try and give all the projectiles consistent size. I have a feeling, based on Lamania feedback, that size is slightly too large, based on playthroughs and people saying that it was still occasionally exploding them on ways that didn't expect, or it hit an enemy that they didn't expect it to, which is sometimes the way with Runearms. If something gets in the way, it's going to hit that thing instead of the thing you targeted. But it shouldn't be doing it as much as it seems like it's doing on Lamania, so probably not for Preview 2, but Preview 3, I'm going to try to scale those down a little bit.
So in the past,
anyway, the hope is that that projectiles will handle somewhat consistently, as opposed to right now where they're all over the board.
So in the past, or prior to Update 60 here, if I had, say, a projectile that maybe would arc out and then reach a target versus one that would shoot straight, you would have different impacts because of that, because it might hit the side of the wall or something,
right,
and one would hit the target, which in general meant that I picked the one that would just go straight to the target.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that wide one is one of the things that hit on this. Nothing is doing that wide shot anymore. There are still some that are a little bit wider than others. Some go very straight, some do a little bit of a curve out. But that extremely wide, 3, 4, 5 shot that you would see before is no longer there. It didn't work for the vast majority of artificers effectively, and it just made those shot types inherently worse than a lot of others.
Yeah. What does this mean for damage of the Runearms?
Okay. So we took a look at the potential damage at all shot tiers of all of the Runearm shot types, and started to try to bring them into a standard. That standard ended up being set around the damage that Salt Shot, Knife Shot, Ghost Shot, Book Shot, and B Shot are currently dealing on live. So those shot type damages have not changed. A lot of other ones that do 5 projectiles, like those shot types do, have been brought up to that damage because they were significantly below it. And then for thinking about the cones and other rune arm shots that might do 1 projectile, but it hits in an AoE when it collides, we set the damage for AoE rune arms around half the potential damage of the single target rune arms, which is actually a huge buff for, I think, all of the AoE rune arms. Trash Shot is the outlier I was talking about earlier. Trash Shot needed to come down because it was doing absolutely double of everything else. It's doing something a lot closer to what the other rune arms are doing now.
Sure.
Sorry, this is a lot of changes that have all kind of moved around each other.
Yeah.
So yes, let's talk for a second about AoE one-hit rune arms versus 2, 3, 4, 5 projectile rune arms. Currently on live, the damage output that they list is about the same, higher or lower based on how they were statted. But the problem with that is that if you charge one of the projectile single target-ish rune arms to full charge and fire it, it hits 5 times. And if you charge, say, the fire cone to full charge, it hits 1 time.
Yeah.
And that means that even if they were statted to the same damage, the single target projectile one was doing 5 times as much damage. Which,
and procs.
Granted,
I mean, it's about procs as well.
And procs, yes.
Yeah. So.
And granted, the AoE one is AoE, but that doesn't mean it should be doing 20% of the damage of a single target, which is why we tried to get it to do about half the damage of single target ones by significantly bringing up how much damage each charge tier of an AoE rune arm gains as it charges up. So on paper, they seem to do an absolute ton of damage now, but that's because they're still hitting 1 time, and that's emulating half the damage that 5 shots of the other rune arms are doing, if that makes sense.
So is the goal to try to do about as much damage as the 5 shots, or to bring the 5 shots down to 1?
About as the goal is to have them. So again, the 5 shots are now set to what Salt Shot and Ghost Shot are doing now, and the AoE rune arms are set to do about half that much damage, but in an AoE.
Okay. I don't know that we really need to go down all the different shot types here, but we should probably just circle back briefly to Trash Shot, because it is an outlier, sure, which means it's the most popular, right? So, because it was doing about twice the amount of damage here. So, specifically as it relates to Trash Shot, what are we doing?
Okay, so Trash Shot has 4 damage types, but 2 of those damage types are Poison and Rust, and almost nothing in the game takes both. Usually you are a construct and take Rust damage but not Poison damage, or you're not a construct and take Poison damage but not Rust damage. You have some stuff like Undead that's going to take neither. The game's going to be the game in terms of where damage types apply. But assuming you were hitting with 3 of the 4, currently on live, you were dealing about double the damage of other rune arms. Of the next best rune arms, like your Salt Shot currently. And that was too high. So we have tried to make... It's keeping all 4 of its damage types, and we have tried to make so that if you hit with 3 of the 4 damage effects, you're doing a little bit higher damage than what Salt Shot and the rest of the new standards are.
Okay.
Correct about that? Yes. So yes, and it's a little bit higher, but you're doing a lot of damage types, and so your spell power is going to be a little bit more divided on that. So we kind of rounded on to keep it slightly higher, but it's going to be doing more similar damage to what other rune arms are doing.
Okay.
And just briefly on the rest of the shots, again, we don't need to go down the whole thing, but a lot of what we did throughout the rest of it is add homing where there was not homing. In the case of rune arm shots that don't explode and just deal damage where they go through, that should allow them to aim at the target you have selected and then keep passing through in that direction. And the other major thing we did a lot of was increase projectile speed. A lot of rune arm projectiles traveled very slowly, and that made them even less likely to hit their target.
Yeah. A related question from Chief Visigoth, which is, can you tab? Let's see, what is it? Will there be a change that allows you to target your rune arm using the tab key in the same way you would for a range shot?
I haven't done anything to the targeting.
Okay.
I'd have to get an exact handle on what it is and isn't doing relative to ranged attacks before I could say for sure.
Yeah, yeah.
But I don't think that'll be coming with this update just based on the timing. It's something I'd have to take time outside this update cycle to kind of dig into.
When we're talking about outliers and artificers and all the other utility of the Macrotechnic, even beyond being an artificer here, it's a little bit difficult question to answer, but High Seer X wants to know, is this in general an artificer buff?
I think throughout it's a complicated answer, right?
Yeah.
Some rune arms didn't change much. B shot is, I think, the only one that took no changes at all. Everything else got something, except for trash shot, which came down. So if you were an arty that was using trash shot, this is maybe not a buff. If you're a artificer using any other rune arm type other than trash shot or B shot, it's some amount of buff. In whether that's just in projectile speed and damage, the fact that it homes now, it really varies based on the rune arm you're using. It does mean that throughout the game, if you find a rune arm, that rune arm is less likely to be terrible, which I would say is overall a buff for artificers as a kind of sub-meta of the game.
Low Teal once is asking about an MCL being listed in for the spells of this tree. Any plans to remove the MCLs from other Epic Destiny spells?
I need to double check the MCL for the. Sorry, say that. Repeat that one more time so I make sure I know.
Noticed no MCL listed for the spells on this tree, comma. Any plans to remove the MCLs from other Epic Destiny spells?
We're having conversations about the role of MCL in Epic Strikes in general. I'm not going to say for sure either way, although I would find it unlikely that we remove all MCLs from them.
A person in chat wants to know if bards will ever be able to revive players. They pretty much can, right? I mean, most bards have UMD.
Inherently,
yeah.
There could be room for more bard archetypes in the future, and maybe that's one of them. That said, I don't see us making the base class able to do that inherently, but there are a few ways around that, obviously. UMD being one of them.
Do these rune arm shots interact with breakables in any more or less than they did before?
Should be unchanged in that regard. I think there are some people, from recalling the feedback thread correctly, saying they would like it if rune arm shots did better at breaking breakables. That is something that I think they should be able to do. I don't know that it's going to fit in for this update.
Okay. All right. Well, I think we've covered the main points here that you've been involved in specifically with Update 60 here, right? Because a lot of this was Torque and others that were involved in other bits of Update 60.
True. Yep, this is largely my things, and then I'm working on future things.
Yeah, things that we will talk about soon. Did Iron Defenders get a boost at all?
No. It's another one of those artificers do many things, and there was a workup of this tree where I tried to pull in a lot of Iron Defender stuff, and it just wasn't working out. I would expect to see some interesting pet upgrades in another Destiny someday. Maybe sooner than later, but there are not in this tree, no.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think I'm going to let you go then here, Steel Star. I really appreciate you joining me on the show today.
Yeah, this was great. Thanks for the good questions, everybody.
All right. I'm going to put you on mute and change scenes. Switch back to my main cam for just a second here while I avoid trying to have elements on screen that I don't want to show off yet. I've kept people waiting. Before we move to the rest, let me see if I can do this. Is this the one where I have it? It is. Alright, I've got something to show you. Don't tell anybody. No, you can tell anyone you want. This is the work-in-progress key art for Vecna Unleashed. And I'm just going to leave this up on the screen for a little bit. We'll have more information about Vecna Unleashed here in the coming weeks, but here's our work-in-progress key art. Looking pretty close to done, I think. But there you go. And thank you so much, Sealstar, for joining me here today. So we do have other bits from this week's Lamania preview, including some monster AI changes, where we're trying to deal with some of the performance impact and general impact of pathing that our monsters engage with. And some of this has been highly controversial on the forums this week. I don't really want to get into a long discussion about some of the pathing specifically as it relates to the XP adjustments, because I'd really rather wait, one, for us to get some additional feedback from you while we weigh these decisions. We've been getting a lot of feedback on it, dozens of pages of comments that we've been able to go through. And so I don't really want to try to rehash that in the next 10 minutes or so here, but in general, you could see some changes to the way that we are proposing to award XP with update 60 here. We're renaming the bravery bonus to a delving bonus and adding that XP to things like aggressor, conquest, onslaught, and what have you. I'm going to let you... I think pretty much everyone who's in chat here right now has already read this thread, but if you haven't, go over to the Lamania forums, take a look at it, consider it a little bit, and get us your feedback on that. And in the near future, I'm going to hopefully have Torque or someone else on where we can talk a little bit about what's going on and what we're intending to do with it. But I almost feel like anything I were to try to really answer today about it is a work in progress and in process based on your feedback and internal discussions and elsewhere. So I don't know that trying to recreate a week's worth of postings on the forums is a particularly good use of my time right now. It's something I would just say that, we're taking the feedback seriously. We've been reading it a lot, and we've already put up some changes. Torque did today for our next preview of Lamania, which will be in the near future. And I will have to look at my calendar here. I actually can't check my calendar right now due to a technical issue. But I believe it may be set for next week. We also have some adjustments taking place related to Dungeon Alert. So monster movement speed bonuses are being increased on Dungeon Alert levels by about 20%. On Red Alert, monsters are getting True Sight, similar to what bosses currently do. On Red Alert, all monsters will get a dodge, penetration, and large hit bonus while flanking, so that is behind you. Only applies if the monster is behind you. And on Red Alert, monsters who have been crowd control will break free in 6 seconds, and break free faster and faster for every time they get CC'd. And I think that is most... Let me check a few things here. First off, let me see if I can get my schedule up. Alright. I wasn't able to access this earlier, so we'll see if that's been fixed now. I'm trying to look at my calendar to see what our next Lamania date is. Yes, we are currently planning for our second Lamania for next week. The first one ended yesterday afternoon. Current plan is to kick off Lamania 2 Tuesday, most likely Tuesday around 2-3 p.m. Eastern is when we've usually been able to get it out, and that would also go through Thursday as well. So some of the changes you saw this week will get adjustments for next week's Lemania, and some of what you're seeing right now on the forums will also get adjustment for Lemania as well. All right, what else do I need to mention? I could mention this. Where do I have this? I don't have it. Let me put it up. We also are doing, this is the start of a somewhat larger scope project that we're having, which is to offer some story hooks and pathing, particularly aimed at the new and perhaps long returning player to the game. This involves the flow of the early game involving taverns in the harbor. So tavern keepers will be able to be asked for quest leads. You know, this addresses a question that we often have been hearing over the years from players, which is that, okay, I'm through Korthos, now what? And the answer to the now what has obviously been quite a bit different based on whether you're a veteran player or a brand new player. And we've been hearing feedback for quite some time from the brand new player that it can be pretty confusing once you get into the harbor to know, oh my gosh, it's somewhat overwhelming, right? Because you've got a million quests that, not a million, you have dozens of quests that you could run at low levels, and you don't know, well, should I go talk to Baudry Cardamon, or should I go into, Keep on the Borderlands, perhaps, or should I go, what should I do? And so we're answering some of that, and we'll be expanding on this, I believe, in the future, where the tavern keepers in these lower level areas will be able to help guide you to sort of a chain of quests. It's an early prototype at this point, and it's part of our new player onboarding efforts. They'll talk a little bit about Favor, a little bit about the Adventure Compendium as well. On Lemania next week, you'll be able to talk to the barkeepers in the Wayward Lobster or the Leaky Dinghy to get a better sense of what we have cooking there. Okay, what else have I not mentioned? Oh, I could mention that this is just moving in a little bit of a sales thing here, but I should mention that the Underdark Patrons Coffer is a limited time offer that we debuted recently, but it runs through June 28th. And June 28th, if I'm looking at my calendar now, is next Wednesday. So running through next Wednesday, you can pick up these Underdark Patrons Coffers in the DDO store. And after that, it's going away from the DDO store. It's theoretically possible we might bring it back in the future, but there is no current plan to do it. So I would strongly encourage anyone who's interested in this limited time offer to pick it up. It'll get you additional character bank storage, shared bank storage, Warriors, Panther Cub, and what have you. As a matter of fact, I got bits of that at least on right now. I can put on the helmet here. There we go. Then there's the Underdark Warrior Panther Cub. And I believe I've still got the mount here as well. Yeah. And this is my new favorite. I have been utilizing this particular. Oops, let me ditch the stream element there. You can see the Panther Cub. Oh, it's looking pretty sweet. But you only have through Wednesday to get this. So if it's something you're interested in, want to consider it now. So, all right. Let me just sit here then and go through a little bit more chat. And then it is roasting in this house right now. I have my air conditioner off because it's just picking up too much on my microphone. And it is roasting here, so I'm going to cut the stream a few minutes early, I think. But let me go through chat and see where we are. I would have to pass along to the team about fixing the mysterious ring at a higher level set so it can match the Caneth crafted level. That sounds like a task we should probably get to in the future. What is the ETA for Update 60 and Update 61? Near future. We're not ready to announce a release date for that today. We're doing our second Lamania next week. We're not going to do one after that because of the July 4th holiday in the United States. And then we'll have another preview after that. I believe it's currently scheduled for the week after the July 4th holiday. There we go. We have some other bits too that we're working on. I don't know how much we've talked about it on the DDO side, but there is work being done on an updated DDO store and store for the other game. And so I would expect to see more information about that in the coming weeks. So that's something that's been going on. I guess I could mention as well that we're currently working through Hardcore Season 8 as well. That's, going through the 18th as well, through July 18th for Hardcore Season 8. And then not too long after that, I think we'll see more information about Update 60 and Vecna released. Vecna Unleashed. But still a little bit early yet, and we've got a bunch of previews and other bits to get through first. So I can't give you a formal date, but if you just kind of parse out a little bit about what I said, it might give you a fairly close timeline to what's going on. Are glamours of unnamed docents getting fixed soonish at all? I've not heard of any plans to do that. Sorry. Yeah, so I really don't want to start getting into a back and forth with chat about some of the specifics related to our XP changes, but as an overall goal, what we're trying to do is offer people an incentive to exploring the dungeons more, while working through some of the sources of pathing and speed-related game performance issues we've seen in recent months, and prevent some of the confusion we've seen over the years related to how first-time XP is awarded. So all of those things have come together in a current proposal that's, as you see, being adjusted. With the hope of incentivizing players to consider killing monsters rather than, say, just running past them and maybe trying to get them to go brain dead and things like that. So I understand, for example, Veni Vidi is saying in chat that you have seen zero evidence that players are completing dungeons faster. Our data has shown that since Update 59, we have in fact seen an increase in completion speed. Not by everybody, of course, right? I mean, there's never one player in this game, and never one way that people play the game. But we have, in general, seen an overall increase in the speed at which players are moving through dungeons, to the point that in some cases it is having a deleterious effect on game performance, not just because of monster pathing, but for other reasons as well. And so it would not be accurate to say that any of these changes are being done to slow players down or to force players to play more slowly. Rather, we're trying to incentivize alternative play styles, like getting that conquest bonus if you want to. We recognize that these changes, as initially presented on Lamania, will have an impact on XP per minute calculations. And it may well be that the final product that is released does have some impact for some players on XP per minute calculations. But I want to avoid any kind of discussion that is like, you're doing X because of Y. And that's really not the case here. We're trying to solve a bunch of things related to the way that progression through the game has ramped up in recent months, while also offering incentives for a wider variety of playstyles that they would find advantageous. So we're not trying to stop anyone from doing anything, and we're not necessarily saying that what you're doing is wrong. What we're doing is trying to take a holistic look at things and make some adjustments to make things better. And as you see, that's a current conversation we're having with the community, and things are changing there. So I'm not here to talk about the specifics of any one change that might have been seen this week, because it's a little bit broader in scope than that. Will the new mounts ever get dances? Gillian Grox asks. Yes, that should be coming here, I believe, with update 60. Speaking of the mount, by the way, what is causing the saber-toothed cat to glitch into the Panther model? That's a very good question. I don't know. I don't know why it's happening, but I did notice that. It was last week's show that someone pointed that out to me, and then afterwards I saw the post on the forums from someone's stream where they showed off the cat, and I was like, ooh, that's interesting. Guess we're going to have to fix that. So, no, the new store will not see a return of gifting. We don't have any current plans to support the game in additional languages. Cateron, I apologize. We know that there are folks who would like to see a Spanish version of the game. That's not something that we have an intention to do at this time. Are things being done to get at the root of the problem with pathing in addition to trying to get players to not spike Dungeon Alert? Yes, that's what we've been talking about on these forum threads. That's basically it. It deals with pathing, Dungeon Alert, increased progression speed, things like that. I've seen that suggestion, Dark Wolf 2002, about having XP potions be based on the number of dungeons completed rather than time. That would be a not insignificant engineering task, but certainly is a pretty good suggestion. I really think it's unlikely that people are going to be able to bank Saga rewards anytime. Like, letting VIPs bank Saga rewards is a suggestion. I don't think that's going to happen. Sorry. So. Alright. Let's, oh, you know what I didn't do? I didn't mention the bonuses and other things that we got going on this week. So let me do that real quick as I get ready to wrap up the show. I would mention this is a double Daily Dice weekend, so you'll get twice the Daily Dice XP through June 25th, and a plus 10 Treasure Hunters boost through June 25th. So this weekend, through the weekend, plus 10 Treasure Hunters boost, but on top of that, if I recall my DDO sales information that I posted yesterday, we also have for our free coupon here a Greater Treasure Hunters Elixir times 5, and that coupon code is Great Treasure. That's available through June 29th, so that'll stack with the World event. So if you want to go after some loot, just might run the weekend forward, go use that code Great Treasure, chug those Greater Treasure Hunters elixirs, and then run in game for that Treasure Hunters boost. Alright, thanks for watching Fridays at 4 on twitch.tv/DDOstream. I'll be back next Friday with more from Lamania, and more of your questions and answers. So thanks very much for joining me. This gets archived over on YouTube at the moment. I I was doing it on Facebook, although I've run into some technical issues there in recent weeks. So at the moment, it's just being archived onto YouTube and on twitch.tv/DDOstream. Hope you have a great weekend, and I will talk to you again next week. Bye-bye.